All right, let's talk about something huge. What if India could finally unlock a massive source of clean energy? One that's been kind of just sitting on the sidelines for decades. Well, today, we're unpacking a landmark law that's designed to do just that. It's called the SHANTI Act, and believe me, it could totally change the game for the country's nuclear future.
Okay, so to really get why this law is such a massive deal, you gotta look at where India is right now. Check out its electricity grid. It's just dominated by coal, right? Renewables are coming up fast, which is great, but then you have nuclear. We're talking clean, reliable, 24/7 power, and it's making up a measly 3% of the total. Yeah, just 3%. And that tiny little number, that's the whole reason we're having this conversation today.
But that tiny share, that is definitely not the plan for the future. Not even close. India has set this absolutely massive target, 100 gigawatts of nuclear capacity by 2047. To put that in perspective, that's more than a 12-fold jump from where we are today. So the billion-dollar question is, how on earth do you bridge that enormous gap?
And, that question really gets to the heart of this whole puzzle. Because, let's be real, India has had world-class nuclear scientists and technology for decades. So why has its power program been, well, kind of stuck in low gear for so long? Turns out, the problem wasn't the tech at all. It was the rulebook.
And that is exactly where this new law comes into play. The SHANTI Act is basically designed to be the key that finally unlocks all that nuclear potential.
So what is this thing exactly? Well, the full name is a bit of a mouthful. The Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India Act. You can see why they just call it the SHANTI Act. It was passed back in December 2025, and it essentially consolidates and replaces all those older laws, like the big one from 1962.
So at its core, the Act really has three main jobs. First, it's got to properly manage the very unique risks that come with nuclear energy. Second, it needs to attract the huge amounts of private investment you need to grow this thing. And third, it's all about finally getting the ball rolling to scale up capacity and hit that massive 100 gigawatt target.
Okay, so how does it actually do all that? Well, the whole thing is built on three key reforms. You can think of them as three pillars that are meant to completely change the game for nuclear power in India. All right, pillar number one, and this one is arguably the biggest change of all: opening up the market. I mean, for decades, nuclear power in India has been a 100% government-run show.
Yeah, the old way was simple: a complete state monopoly. The government did literally everything, from start to finish. The SHANTI Act flips that script, opening the door for private companies to finally get in on the action. And this is a fundamental, groundbreaking shift, really, all aimed at bringing in the cash and the competition to get things moving much, much faster.
But hold on, this isn't a total free-for-all. The government is being really strategic here. The most sensitive parts of the whole process, we're talking uranium mining, fuel enrichment, and managing waste, all of that stays firmly under state control. The big changes on the commercial side, building the power plants, owning them, operating them, that's now open for business.
And a report from the Chintan Research Foundation really summed up this whole strategy perfectly. They said, and I'm quoting here, this is not a privatization of nuclear sovereignty, but a recognition that the government can focus its resources on strategic fuel cycle development while leveraging private investments for capacity expansion. In other words, let the government focus on the tricky strategic stuff and let private money do what it does best: build things.
But look, opening the market doesn't mean a thing if investors are too scared to jump in. And a massive, massive barrier for private money in nuclear has always been that one scary question: liability. What happens if there's an accident? And that brings us right to the second pillar of the Act: managing that risk.
So what the Act does is create this really clear, multi-layered system to handle it. Step one, the plant operator's own liability is capped at 300 million SDRs. Now that's just an international reserve asset. Basically, it's a stable, insurable amount. If damages go beyond that cap, step two, the government steps in with its own compensation. And then, for a truly worst-case scenario, there's a final tier of support from an international convention that India is part of. This predictable tiered structure is huge because it removes that fear of unlimited financial risk, which is absolutely essential to making these projects investable.
Okay, on to our final pillar of reform. This one is all about making sure the rules are crystal clear and, more importantly, that they're enforced fairly. You can't play the game without a strong, independent referee, right?
And to create that strong referee system, the Act lays out a very clear four-step process for any regulatory disputes. It all starts with the main regulator, the AERB. If you don't like their decision, it can be reviewed by an expert council. From there, you can appeal to a special electricity tribunal, and as a final backstop, it can go all the way to the Supreme Court. Having this clear, predictable pathway, man, that's vital for giving investors the confidence they need to commit for the long haul.
So there you have it. The law itself looks like a total game changer. But as we all know, passing a law is one thing. Turning it into actual power plants is a whole different ballgame. And there are still some pretty significant hurdles on the horizon.
And yeah, these are the big ones. First up, money. Investors need to know exactly how they'll get paid. That means clear tariff frameworks, and they'll need access to the kind of long-term, low-cost loans these massive projects demand. Second, the grid. You can't just plug a giant nuclear plant into an old grid. The infrastructure has to be upgraded and ready for it. Third, people. India needs to train thousands and thousands of skilled nuclear engineers and technicians. And finally, the supply chain. You have to build these components here at home if you want to control costs and timelines. I mean, each one of these is a massive challenge all by itself.
So let's just zoom out for a second and look at the big picture here. What does all this really mean for India? Are we actually looking at a new nuclear dawn?
Here's the bottom line. The SHANTI Act is a genuine turning point. There's no other way to put it. It directly tackles the legal and financial roadblocks that have held this sector back for decades. For the very first time, it makes nuclear power a truly realistic, scalable pillar in India's whole strategy to get to energy security and hit its ambitious clean energy goals.
But in the end, it all comes down to execution, doesn't it? The SHANTI Act has completely rewritten the rulebook, creating a brand new playing field for nuclear energy in India. But the real question remains, with these new rules in place, can India build the momentum it needs to overcome all those hurdles and actually win this incredibly high-stake energy race? That's the real billion-dollar question we'll all be watching.